and welcome to Broken Entertainment. So today I'm going to cover a couple of things. First of all, I really want to talk about what I have coming up, because one of the main focuses of this channel now is to talk about indie productions and stuff people are making that is being made outside of the traditional entertainment system, being whether it be movies or books or comics or what have you. And I have some indie books coming up on the next video that I think people will be really interested in, and I'm excited to talk about that. But for this one, I want to talk about mine. So I've talked briefly in the past about my plans, particularly this year, where I'm going to get a serial story published called Agent, is from the perspective of what will be one of the major villains in my debut novel series. And this is her before she gets into the position that she's in. And it's very much a villain protagonist kind of story where although she is the protagonist, although she is saving the day, she's not a nice person, right? And there's not a human. It's also a non-human perspective, and I do that some in my writing, where it's solely a non-human perspective. But most of the time, I go back and forth where those two kind of are intersecting. You know, there's in the novels, there's the first novel, Invasion, is mostly told from a human point of view. There's just a handful of sequences that are from the alien perspective. And the reason for that is because I want to introduce readers to this world, by and large, through the human perspective, the perspective you are most familiar with. But before that comes out, I do have a series of stories coming out. They're serialized format, and they're not from the human perspective. They're from the perspective of a character named Zai, who is an agent when the first story starts out, and she's a spy on Earth. She's been there for 600 years. She's been studying humanity and reporting back home, and she discovers that someone is trying to get alien weaponry into the hands of the Nazis. She discovers a lot more is going on under the scenes, and normally she would not interfere, but alien technology is involved. She has to figure out what's going on. You get to see a lot of how kind of the inner workings of this character. And as you follow her story, you learn very, very quickly she will act immediately. And if that action is what would otherwise be considered abhorrent, for example, murder, and so on, she'll do it. She doesn't hesitate. She doesn't slow down. She just does what she needs to do, and she moves on. And you kind of learn why she's that way, and how she picks up the information that she knows later on about humanity and how she understands humanity. And she is very much not the good guy, but she is the only person standing between humanity and a really bad end. Don't want to reveal too much about that, but it's very much the question of, what if the only hero available wasn't a hero at all, but was a villain? The only person who could stop Zero Hour is the person you don't want doing it, essentially. It's a very exciting story. It moves pretty quickly. The pace is fast. There is undercover operations. There is violence. There is combat. Swordplay even comes into it. You get a little bit of everything in this, and the characters I think is great. She's fun to read. She's fun to write. She is a little bit sarcastic, not in the Marvel sense, but even though she flips easily between her human persona and her actual self, and even though when she is her actual self, she appears cold and calculating on the outside. You kind of get this, because from her perspective, you get this look into her personality that you don't get to have later on, and that the characters will not have later on. So very excited to do that. I've got the cover art is the next step in the process. It's going through final editing, and we will hopefully be publishing that at the end of this year or very near to that. And it will come out in episodic format. When it does, it'll be digital release first, and then it will be a physical release in collected volumes later on. So we'll have that, and then we have its sequel Directorate coming up after that, and then hopefully be leading into the novel right away, although I do have a series of other stories planned as well. So I'm really excited to get those out there. I'm tired of, as many of you are, tired of what the entertainment industry has to offer and what they don't have to offer, and the nonsense that they're doing. I really want, this stuff is for everyone to me. This is not something where, hey, if you agree with what I say, buy my stuff. This is, hey, if you're interested in science fantasy and you want something fun, buy my stuff. And if it makes you think along the way, that's fine, that's great. But it's not going to hit you over the head with messaging. It's not going to hit you over the head with politics. And you're going to get to know these fun characters and this setting that is really very unique in the science fiction, science fantasy realm. So let's get on to the topic at hand. Traditional publishing industry is increasingly open about, hey, we're only looking for certain kinds of people. We're not looking for certain kinds of stories. We're looking for certain kinds of people. If you don't fit this mold, i.e. you're white, you don't have to be male anymore, you're just white, or straight, and that is an or, we're not interested in hearing from you. It's a disservice to everybody, because once people understand that a lot of these authors that are being published that are, people of color, as they're calling them, which I think is a terrible word, or LGBTQ or what have you, people are going to start to realize these people are being published just because of that. And you stop buying it. It's like a lot of people don't buy self-published books because there's a stigma with self-published books, but also because you look at the cover art on a lot of them and they're all very similar. And it makes you can identify it almost immediately. And it turns some people off. This is going to have that effect. If it isn't already. So this is from the UK, but I want you to understand this is happening everywhere. This is happening in the United States. This is happening in the UK. This is happening, I'm sure, in Europe. The vast majority of the people who are in the publishing industry are all the same, which is why it's so ironically funny, is that they're saying you have to be a certain kind of person, and you can't be white, and you can't be straight, and you need to be LGBTQ, or you need to be a person of color, or you need to be this, or you need to be that. But the people saying this are all white women, most of whom are straight. So I want to show you this right here, in case you think I'm just making this up. This is a report on the diversity of the U.S. publishing industry. As of 2019, 74% of the respondents in the industry were cis women, dropping from 4% since 2015. 23% of respondents were cis men. Non-binary, etc., represent 1%. The huge majority of people in the publishing industry are all the same demographic. And they're out there going, oh no, you need to be this, and you need to be that, and you need to be this other thing, and you can't have our demographic. We're going to pretend our demographic's different. You can't have ours be published. We need to force the publication of other people based not on their skin color. And again, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm making it up, I want to show you what they're saying. Not just the numbers, but the actual words. So this is from, again, this one is from the UK. This is from a specific, this is from Ash Literary. We are actively seeking voices that have historically been underrepresented, particularly with tropes that are often said to be overdone. We are not interested in stories about white, able-bodied World War II evacuees, but would welcome that story from disabled LGBTQ or BIPOC perspective. If your book isn't about an identity that is not yours, we will not be a good fit. This includes books based on the experiences of family members and friends. So it goes on, and they talk about this particular agent over in the UK. She's keenly interested in hearing from authors traditionally underrepresented in the industry, including, but not restricted to, writers of color, queer, trans, and non-binary writers, working class writers, disabled writers, etc. So here to me is the most damaging part. This is from TGLA, which is a different publisher. Same country. The main focus of TGLA is to represent writers who are underrepresented in mainstream publishing. Eligibility is based on the author, not the material or subject matter of the work they are submitting. If you yourself are not eligible by the criteria listed in the first question above, we are unable to proceed with your submission. In other words, they're not interested in if you wrote a good story, but if you fit in their checkbox list. And here is that list. Am I eligible for representation by TGLA? Writers of color, working class writers, LGBTQ plus writers, writers with a disability. We also accept care experienced people, adoptees, those with career status, writers who are 60 plus in age, refugees and asylum, those who have experienced homelessness, abuse and trauma survivors, those with long-term illnesses, and those who have experienced incarceration. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm really interested in seeing a story from this point of view. It's another thing to say, hey, if you aren't, I'm not interested. And if your story is good or not, I don't care. Just make sure you check these boxes, then I'll look at it. Absolutely ridiculous. And this is what we're dealing with in traditional publishing. This is why so many of us have moved to self-publication. It's not because we're not good enough, as a lot of people will tell you. When the traditional book published, by the way, the traditional published book sells 5 copies. It's in the same level as self-published books. But they tell you, traditional publishing is the legit publishing. No, a lot of people are moving away because they're tired of the crap. Okay? The traditional publishing industry has become so abundantly political and agenda-driven that it's driven people away. And it's driving them either to self-publication or no publication. And there are other statistics that will point to you that male readers are starting to disappear. Because we're not seeing anything for men anymore. That's not allowed. Everything is female-led, female-oriented, female-directed, female, you must be female to like this kind of story. And men are seeing their spaces in books just shoved away. It's not to say that you shouldn't publish this type of person or this type of person. It's to say you need to be publishing stories based on their quality. And if you want to then also say, hey, we're interested also in these because we don't get many of these, then that brings awareness to the people that you're interested in without shoving aside everything else. Very frustrating as a writer and very frustrating as a reader. I am not going to traditionally publish. It's not going to happen. I learned a lot when I tried to get traditionally published that was helpful. And I've learned a lot more in other ways. But the whole process is screwed. I'd rather create my fun stories with fun characters, push them out there. My writing can get dark, but it is always hopeful at the end because to me, we've got enough nihilistic crap. The time for nihilism has passed. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, ring the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.